the jungle fell silent. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes with evening, but the terrifying, unnatural silence that every Amazon veteran knows means death is near. In that suffocating stillness, two massive shapes moved through the undergrowth like liquid shadows, each one over 20 feet of pure muscle and predatory instinct. Dona Rosa's scream pierced the air as the first anaconda's coils wrapped around her frail body, squeezing with the force of a hydraulic press. 20 feet away, Senor Joao felt his ribs crack under the crushing embrace of the second serpent. At 73 and 75 years old, they had no chance against these apex predators of the Amazon. But then, cutting through the horror like thunder, came the sound that would change everything. The deep, primal roar of two Argentine dogos. Guardian and Fortress had arrived. And what happened next defied every law of nature, every expectation of survival, and every understanding of loyalty between man and beast. The battle that followed would be talked about in villages along the Amazon for generations. But to understand how two dogs could face down creatures that have remained unchanged since the age of dinosaurs, we need to go back to the beginning, to a love story that started 70 years ago and a bond forged in the unforgiving wilderness of Argentina. Before we dive into this incredible true story, I need you to do something. In the comments below, tell me what country you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button for Wild Echo Untold, because we're dedicated to sharing the most remarkable adventures of our golden generation. Trust me, what you're about to witness will restore your faith in the unbreakable bond between humans and their four-legged guardians.
Dona Rosa Esperanza and Senor João Batista weren't your typical septuagenarians. While most people their age were content with evening television and afternoon naps, these two Brazilian adventurers had spent the last 15 years of their retirement exploring every corner of South America's most dangerous wilderness areas. Rosa, a former nurse from São Paulo, had always possessed an adventurous spirit that her late first husband had tried unsuccessfully to tame. At 58, after his passing, she made a promise to herself. She would live every remaining day as if it were her last adventure. João, a retired mining engineer from Minas Gerais, had lost his wife of 40 years to cancer and found himself drowning in loneliness until he met Rosa at a hiking club for seniors. Their love story began on a treacherous mountain trail in Patagonia, where Rosa twisted her ankle and João carried her 3 miles to safety on his 70-year-old back. That act of gallantry sparked a romance that proved age was nothing more than a number. They married 6 months later in a simple ceremony attended by their children, grandchildren, and 2 very special wedding guests. Guardian and Fortress weren't just dogs to Rosa and João. They were the children they never had together. Guardian, a magnificent white Argentine dogo with intelligent amber eyes, had been rescued as a puppy from illegal dogfighting rings in Buenos Aires. His body bore the scars of those early months of hell, but his spirit remained unbroken. Fortress, slightly smaller but equally imposing, had been abandoned in the streets of Rosario, surviving on scraps and his own cunning until João found him during one of their South American expeditions. The Argentine Dogo breed was created in the 1920s by Dr. Antonio Nores Martinez specifically for big game hunting in Argentina's dangerous wilderness. These dogs were bred to take down wild boar, pumas, and even jaguars, apex predators that could kill a human with a single swipe. Standing nearly 30 inches tall and weighing up to 120 pounds of pure muscle, Argentine Dogos possess a unique combination of power, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty that makes them perhaps the most formidable guardian breed on Earth. But Guardian and Fortress weren't just their impressive genetics. They were family members who had never left Rosa and João's side for even a single day in the 5 years since their adoption. They had climbed the Andes, trekked through Patagonian glaciers, and survived sandstorms in the Atacama. Each adventure had strengthened not just their muscles, but the invisible bond that connected four hearts across species lines. Rosa would often joke that she and Zhuang were getting too old for such dangerous expeditions, but the truth was that they felt more alive in the wilderness than anywhere else. The jungle called to them with an irresistible voice, promising new discoveries and unforgettable memories. They never imagined that their next adventure would test the very limits of courage and loyalty.
The Amazon rainforest in the Mamirawa region of Brazil is home to some of the largest anacondas on Earth. These prehistoric giants can grow up to 30 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds. Living fossils that have perfected the art of killing over millions of years. Local indigenous tribes call them the water demons and tell stories of entire villages swallowed by the largest specimens. The morning of March 15, 2024, started like any other for Rosa and Joao. They had hired a local guide named Carlos to take them deep into a section of flooded forest that few tourists ever see. Their goal was simple: to photograph the legendary Victoria Amazonica water lilies that bloom only during a brief window each year. Guardian and Fortress, as always, accompanied them, their white coats making them look like ghostly guardians against the deep green backdrop of the jungle. Carlos had warned them about the dangers: jaguars, caimans, poisonous spiders the size of dinner plates, and snakes that could swallow a man whole. But Rosa and Joao had faced down a charging elephant seal in Antarctica and survived a blizzard in the Himalayas. They felt confident in their abilities and completely secure in the protection of their two four-legged companions. The first sign that something was wrong came at exactly 2:47 p.m., according to Joao's waterproof watch. The jungle, which had been alive with the sounds of hundreds of species, suddenly fell completely silent. Not even the constant buzz of insects could be heard. Guardian's ears perked up first, followed immediately by Fortress. Both dogs began a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the depths of their souls. Carlos, their guide, went pale. In his 30 years of leading expeditions into the Amazon, he had never heard the jungle go completely quiet during daylight hours. "We need to leave," he whispered urgently. "Now. Something very bad is coming." But it was already too late. The first anaconda appeared like a nightmare materializing from the depths of hell. It was enormous, easily 25 feet long and as thick as a telephone pole. Its scales were dark brown and black, perfect camouflage that had allowed it to get within striking distance without being detected. But what made Joel's blood run cold wasn't the size of the creature. It was the fact that a second, equally massive anaconda was emerging from the opposite direction. These weren't random encounters. The serpents were hunting as a coordinated pair, using tactics that scientists had only theorized about but never documented. They had selected Rosa and Joao as prey and were moving in for the kill with the patience and precision of apex predators. Guardian and Fortress sensed the danger before their human companions fully understood what was happening. Their bodies went rigid, every muscle tensed for combat. These dogs had been bred to face down South America's most dangerous predators, and every instinct inherited from generations of fighters was screaming that a battle for survival was about to begin. Carlos dropped his equipment and ran. His footsteps disappeared into the jungle as the two massive anacondas closed in on their prey. Rosa grabbed Joao's hand, and in that moment of terror, they both realized that their 5 years of adventures together might be coming to an end in the most horrible way imaginable. The anaconda struck with terrifying speed.
The attack happened faster than human eyes could follow. The first anaconda, the larger of the two monsters, launched itself at Rosa with explosive force. Despite weighing over 400 pounds, it moved through the air like a missile, its mouth opening to reveal fangs designed for gripping prey while its body prepared to constrict. Rosa's scream echoed through the jungle as 25 feet of muscle and scales wrapped around her torso. The anaconda's first quail knocked the breath from her lungs, and she could feel her ribs bending under pressure that increased with each passing second. These serpents don't inject venom. They don't need to. They simply squeeze until every bone breaks and every organ ruptures. Simultaneously, the second anaconda struck at Joao. At 75, the retired engineer had maintained his strength through years of adventure, but he was no match for a creature that could snap a caiman's spine with a casual flex. The snake's coils wrapped around his chest and arms, immediately cutting off circulation and making it impossible for him to help his beloved Rosa. Both elderly adventurers found themselves in the grip of evolutionarily perfect killing machines. Anacondas have been perfecting their hunting technique for over 60 million years. Their muscle fibers are arranged in a helical pattern that allows them to exert pressure exceeding 90 pounds per square inch, enough to stop a human heart in under a minute. But Guardian and Fortress weren't going to let their family die without a fight. The moment the anaconda struck, both Argentine dogos exploded into action. Guardian, the larger of the two monsters, launched himself directly at the snake attacking Rosa. His 120 pounds of muscle and bone collided with the anaconda's head in an impact that echoed through the jungle like a gunshot. Argentine dogos were bred specifically for this kind of combat. Their jaws can exert a bite force of over 500 pounds per square inch, more than enough to crush bones. Their necks are incredibly thick and muscular, designed to absorb the shock of grappling with dangerous prey. Most importantly, they possess a fighting instinct that borders on supernatural. They will never retreat, never surrender, and never abandon their pack. Guardian's teeth sank into the scales behind the anaconda's head, the only spot where his bite could do real damage. The serpent's head whipped around with shocking speed, trying to dislodge the dog, but Guardian held on with the determination of his breed. His growls were so deep and primal that they seemed to make the very air vibrate. Fortress, meanwhile, had circled around to attack the second anaconda from a different angle. These dogs weren't just brave, they were intelligent fighters who understood tactics. While Guardian engaged in direct combat, Fortress looked for the snake's vulnerable spots, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The snake holding Joao sensed the new threat and tried to retreat toward the water, dragging the elderly man with it. But Fortress wasn't going to allow that. He lunged forward and clamped his jaws around the anaconda's tail section, his forelegs planted firmly in the mud, creating an anchor point that prevented the serpent from reaching the safety of deep water. What followed was unlike anything ever documented in the scientific literature. Two domesticated dogs, each weighing barely 100 pounds, were engaging in mortal combat with two of South America's apex predators. The size difference should have made the battle laughably one-sided, but Argentine dogos aren't ordinary dogs. The anaconda attacking Rosa began the ancient dance of death that had served its species for millions of years. It tried to roll, using its massive weight to crush Guardian against the ground. But the dog had fought pit bulls and survived knife attacks in his previous life. He understood how to use his opponent's size against them. Every time the snake rolled, Guardian rolled with it, maintaining his grip on the creature's neck while using the momentum to reposition himself for a better angle of attack. His claws raked against the anaconda's scales, searching for soft spots between the armor-like protection. Rosa, still trapped in the snake's coils, was turning blue from lack of oxygen. Each time the anaconda flexed its muscles, she could feel her ribs cracking under the pressure. But she could see Guardian fighting with everything he had, and she used every ounce of her remaining strength to stay conscious, knowing that her survival depended entirely on her four-legged Guardian. 20 feet away, Fortress was engaged in his own life-and-death struggle. The second anaconda, frustrated by the dog's grip on its tail, had released Joao and turned its full attention to this new threat. The serpent's head snapped toward Fortress with lightning speed, its mouth opening wide enough to swallow the dog's entire head. But Argentine dogos are masters of combat timing. At the last possible second, Fortress released the snake's tail and ducked under the striking head, immediately pivoting to attack the anaconda's exposed neck. His teeth found their mark, and suddenly, both serpents found themselves locked in combat with opponents who refused to give ground. Just when it seemed the battle had reached a stalemate, Joao made a discovery that would change everything. Despite his injuries and the trauma of being nearly crushed to death, the old mining engineer's sharp eyes had noticed something that everyone else had missed. These weren't just any anacondas. They were a mated pair, and they were protecting something. Hidden in the tangled roots of a massive cecropia tree, barely visible through the undergrowth, was a nest containing nearly 30 anaconda eggs. Each egg was the size of a softball, and inside each one was a baby anaconda that would grow up to become another apex predator of the Amazon. This explained the unprecedented behavior. Anacondas are typically solitary creatures, but during mating season and egg-laying period,
they become incredibly territorial and aggressive. These two monsters weren't just hunting for food. They were defending their future offspring from perceived threats. João realized that as long as Rosa, Guardian, Fortress, and he remained near the nest, the anacondas would fight to the death. But he also understood something else. The serpent's protective instincts might be the key to survival. "Rosa," he gasped, his voice barely audible through his damaged ribs. "The eggs! We need to get away from the eggs." But moving was easier said than done. Guardian and Fortress were locked in combat with creatures that outweighed them by 300 pounds each. The dogs were holding their own through sheer courage and fighting instinct, but they couldn't win a prolonged battle against such massive opponents.
João's mining background had taught him that sometimes the best way to move an immovable object isn't through force, but through understanding leverage and psychology. If these anacondas were protecting their nest, then the solution wasn't to fight them. It was to convince them that the threat was moving away from their eggs. Despite his injuries, João began crawling away from the hidden nest, making as much noise as possible to attract the serpent's attention. His plan was simple, but dangerous. Draw the anacondas away from their defensive position and toward an area where Guardian and Fortress would have better fighting terrain. Rosa, understanding her husband's strategy despite her oxygen-deprived state, used her remaining strength to help. She began kicking and struggling, not to escape, but to make herself seem like she was trying to get closer to the nest. The anaconda holding her tightened its grip and began pulling her in the opposite direction, exactly what João had hoped for. The change in battlefield made all the difference. As the combat moved away from the root-tangled area near the nest, Guardian and Fortress found themselves on more solid ground, where their speed and agility advantages could be fully utilized. Guardian, still locked onto his anaconda's neck, began using a technique that seemed almost supernatural in its precision. Instead of trying to outmuscle the serpent, he began timing his movements with the snake's breathing patterns. Every time the anaconda exhaled and its body relaxed slightly, Guardian would adjust his grip and increase pressure on the creature's windpipe. Fortress, meanwhile, had discovered that his opponent had an old injury, a section of scarred scales near its midsection where it probably tangled with the caiman years earlier. The dog focused all his attacks on this weak point, his teeth finding purchase in the damaged area where the scales didn't fit together as tightly. The battle had been raging for nearly 15 minutes when something extraordinary happened. Guardian, who had been maintaining his death grip on the first anaconda's neck, suddenly released his hold and stepped back. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like he was retreating, giving up the fight when Rosa needed him most. But Guardian wasn't retreating. He was repositioning for the killing blow. The anaconda, suddenly free from the dog's grip, made a fatal mistake. Instead of immediately striking again, it paused to assess this unexpected development. In that split second of hesitation, Guardian launched himself forward with every ounce of strength in his powerful hindquarters. His jaws clamped down not on the snake's neck, but on its skull, just behind the eyes, where the bone was thinnest. The crushing pressure of his bite, combined with his full body weight, created a force that even an anaconda's prehistoric armor couldn't withstand. The sound was like a branch snapping in a hurricane. The anaconda's body convulsed once, then went completely limp. Guardian had achieved what seemed impossible. A 120-pound dog had killed a 400-pound apex predator through sheer determination and perfect technique. Rosa collapsed to the ground, gasping for air as the dead snake's coils loosened around her body. Her ribs were cracked and her lungs burned, but she was alive because of her four-legged guardian's courage. But the battle wasn't over yet. The second anaconda, seeing its mate's death, entered a state of rage that transformed it into something even more dangerous than before. It released its grip on João and turned its full attention to Fortress, who suddenly found himself facing an enemy with nothing left to lose. The snake's attack was more vicious and coordinated than anything it had shown before. Its massive head struck like a sledgehammer, and only Fortress's incredible reflexes saved him from having his skull crushed. He rolled sideways, came up running, and immediately launched a counterattack at the serpent's midsection. But this anaconda had learned from watching its mate's death. Instead of trying to constrict the dog, it began using its head as a weapon, striking again and again with the force of a wrecking ball. Each blow that connected would have killed most dogs instantly, but Argentine dogos are built to absorb punishment that would destroy other breeds.
Fortress took a glancing blow to his shoulder that sent him tumbling, but he rolled with the impact and came up snarling. His left front leg was injured, but his fighting spirit was undiminished. He circled the massive snake, looking for an opening, knowing that one mistake would mean death. The anaconda reared up to its full height, nearly 8 feet of muscle and fury towering over the injured dog. Its mouth opened wide, revealing the pink interior and rows of backward curving teeth designed to prevent prey from escaping once caught. In that moment, with death looming above him, Fortress made a decision that would define the meaning of courage. Instead of retreating or trying to dodge, he charged directly at the anaconda's open mouth. What happened next defied every law of physics and probability. As the anaconda's head came down to crush him, Fortress let straight up, using his powerful hindquarters to launch himself directly into the snake's mouth. But instead of being swallowed, he twisted his body at the last second and clamped his jaws around the serpent's lower jaw. The anaconda, suddenly finding its mouth held open by 120 pounds of determined muscle, couldn't close its jaws to bite or swallow. It thrashed wildly, trying to shake off the dog, but Fortress held on with the grip of death itself. With his mouth forced open, the anaconda couldn't breathe properly. Its thrashing became weaker, then desperate, then finally ceased altogether. The great serpent collapsed, defeated not by superior size or strength, but by the tactical genius and unwavering courage of a dog who refused to accept defeat. Guardian, despite his own injuries, limped over to help his packmate. Together, the 2 Argentine dogos had accomplished something that would have seemed impossible just minutes earlier. They had defeated 2 of the Amazon's apex predators in single combat. Rosa and Joan, both badly injured but alive, pulled themselves together and crawled toward their 4-legged saviors. The dogs, exhausted and bleeding from multiple wounds, collapsed next to their humans. In that moment of victory, the bond between species transcended everything that science claimed to understand about animal behavior. They had survived not because of superior technology or human intelligence, but because of something much more powerful: the unbreakable loyalty between a pack that had chosen to face death together rather than abandon each other.
In the immediate aftermath of the battle, the Amazon jungle remained eerily silent. Even the insects seemed stunned by what they had witnessed. 2 domesticated dogs defeating creatures that had ruled this ecosystem since the dawn of time. The only sounds were the labored breathing of 4 survivors and the distant splash of Carlos, their guide, returning to investigate what he was certain would be a massacre. Guardian lay on his side, his white coat stained with blood from multiple wounds. The anaconda's scales had cut him like razor blades during their death struggle, and his left eye was swollen shut from a blow that would have killed most dogs. But his amber eye that remained open was alert and focused on Rosa, making sure she was still breathing. Fortress was in even worse condition. The final battle with the second anaconda had left him with a dislocated shoulder and deep puncture wounds along his neck where the serpent's teeth had found their mark. But, like his packmate, he remained alert and protective, positioning his injured body between Joao and the jungle, ready to fight again if necessary. Rosa's ribs were definitely broken. She could feel the sharp edges grinding against each other with each breath. Her torso was a tapestry of bruises in the exact pattern of the anaconda's scales, and her left arm hung at an odd angle. But she was alive, and she knew with absolute certainty that she owed that life to the courage of 2 dogs who had faced down monsters to save her. Joao's injuries were more internal, but equally serious. The crushing pressure of the anaconda's coils had damaged something in his chest, and he was coughing up small amounts of blood. His engineering mind was already calculating their chances of survival. They were deep in the Amazon, hours from the nearest medical facility, with no means of communication, and 2 dogs who needed immediate veterinary care. Carlos appeared through the undergrowth like a man seeing ghosts. He had fled when the anacondas attacked, certain that he would return to find 4 corpses and 2 well-fed serpents. Instead, he discovered something that challenged everything he thought he knew about the natural world. 2 massive anacondas lay dead in the mud, their prehistoric bodies testament to a battle that should never have been won by the smaller opponents. The dogs who had achieved this impossible victory were barely conscious, but their position told the entire story. They were still placed protectively between their humans and potential threats. Meu Deus! Carlos whispered in Portuguese, his voice filled with awe. "My God, I have lived in this jungle for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like this. These dogs? They are not normal dogs. They are guardians sent by God himself." The guide's reaction was important for reasons beyond simple amazement. Carlos was a member of the Caboclo people, descendants of indigenous Amazonians who had intermarried with Portuguese colonists. His culture held deep beliefs about animal spirits and the sacred bonds between humans and their guardian creatures. In witnessing the battle, he had seen something that his people would consider miraculous. He immediately began treating the injuries as best he could with supplies from his emergency kit. But it was clear that all 4 survivors needed immediate medical attention. Using his satellite phone, a device he had never mentioned during their hiring negotiations, he called for emergency evacuation. The next few hours became a desperate race against time and the Amazon's unforgiving nature. A medical helicopter was dispatched from Manaus, but it would take nearly 2 hours to reach their remote location. In the meantime, Carlos used every skill learned from 30 decades in the jungle to keep his charges alive. Guardian had lost a significant amount of blood and was showing signs of shock. His breathing was shallow, and his remaining eye was becoming glassy. Carlos fashioned pressure bandages from his spare clothing and used his belt as a tourniquet around the dog's worst leg wound. Fortress was unconscious, his breathing so shallow it was barely perceptible. The guide recognized the signs of internal bleeding and knew that the dog might not survive the helicopter ride to medical facilities. He began a traditional Caboclo healing ritual, mixing herbs and speaking prayers in a language that predated European colonization. Rosa was the most alert of the 4, despite her obvious injuries. Her nursing background allowed her to assist Carlos in treating the dogs, even though every movement sent waves of pain through her damaged ribs. She refused morphine from the guide's medical kit, insisting that the pain medication be saved for Guardian and Fortress. Joao slipped in and out of consciousness, but during his lucid moments, he kept asking about the dogs. "Are they going to make it?" he would whisper. "Did we lose them? I can't lose them, Rosa. Not after what they did for us." When the helicopter finally arrived, the medical team expected to find 2 human patients and 2 dead dogs. Instead, they discovered something that would become legend among Amazon rescue pilots. Guardian and Fortress, despite injuries that should have been fatal, were still alive and still maintaining protective positions around Rosa and Joao. The helicopter's veterinary medic, Dr. Maria Santos, later said that she had never seen animals with such powerful will to live. She reported it was as if they refused to die until they were certain their humans were safe. Even under anesthesia, they would wake up if they heard Rosa or Joao's voices in distress. The flight to Manaus was touch and go for all 4 patients. Guardian went into cardiac arrest twice during the journey, but each time the medical team managed to revive him. Fortress's blood pressure dropped so low that it barely registered on monitoring equipment, yet he continued breathing against all odds. Rosa and Joao, despite their own serious injuries, held hands across the helicopter's medical bay and spoke constantly to their dogs, their voices providing an anchor that seemed to help the injured animals hold on to life. Word of the Anaconda battle began spreading before the helicopter even landed in Manaus. Carlos had used his satellite phone to contact not just emergency services, but also his cousin, who worked for a local TV station. The story of 2 elderly adventurers saved by their heroic dogs was exactly the kind of human interest story that captures global attention. By the time the medical helicopter touched down at the hospital, news crews were already waiting. The footage of Guardian and Fortress being carried into the veterinary clinic on stretchers, their white coats stained with blood, but their eyes still alert, became one of the most shared videos in Brazilian internet history. The story spread from local news to national broadcast to international media within 24 hours. Major networks from around the world sent crews to Manaus to cover the story of the Amazon guardian angels, 2 dogs who had achieved the impossible through pure loyalty and courage. But the real climax wasn't the media attention or the global fame. It came 3 days later, when all 4 survivors were finally stable enough to be reunited in a single hospital room. Guardian and Fortress, despite being bandaged and connected to IV drips, immediately positioned themselves on either side of Rosa and Joao's bed, resuming their protective duties even in the safety of modern medicine. The photograph of that reunion, 2 battered elderly humans and 2 wounded dogs lying together in a hospital room, all 4 of them alive against impossible odds,
became a symbol of the unbreakable bond between species. It was shared millions of times across social media platforms, each share accompanied by comments about loyalty, courage, and the power of love to overcome even the most desperate circumstances. Dr. Santos, the veterinary medic who had treated Guardian and Fortress during their helicopter ride, summed up the miracle best. "I have been treating animals for 20 years, and I have never seen anything like this. These dogs didn't just fight those anacondas. They defeated death itself through sheer force of will. They are living proof that love is the most powerful force in nature."
The weeks that followed the Amazon incident transformed Guardian and Fortress from local heroes into global symbols of loyalty and courage. Their recovery process, documented daily by media outlets around the world, became a testament to both the resilience of the Argentine Dogo breed and the power of love to heal even the most severe trauma. Guardian's injuries were extensive, but not life-threatening. The anaconda's scales had lacerated his hide in dozens of places, and the crushing pressure of the serpent's coils had bruised his internal organs. His left eye, swollen shut during the battle, eventually healed completely, though he retained a distinctive scar that ran from his forehead to his cheek, a permanent reminder of his heroism. Fortress faced more serious challenges. The final confrontation with the second anaconda had damaged his shoulder joint so severely that veterinarians initially believed amputation might be necessary. However, Dr. Santos and her team decided to attempt a revolutionary surgical procedure that had never been tried on a dog his size. The operation took 6 hours and required specialists flown in from Sao Paulo, but it was completely successful. Rosa's broken ribs healed cleanly, though she would carry the anaconda's scale pattern as permanent bruising for the rest of her life. She claimed to wear these marks as badges of honor and would often show them to visitors while telling the story of her dog's heroism. Her injured arm required 2 surgeries to repair completely, but her indomitable spirit remained unchanged. Zhao's internal injuries proved more complex than initially diagnosed. The anaconda's crushing embrace had caused a small tear in his lung and damaged several blood vessels around his heart. He required a month of hospitalization, but his engineering mind found the medical equipment fascinating, and he spent his recovery time designing improvements to the hospital's patient monitoring systems. The story of Guardian and Fortress captured international attention in ways that surprised everyone involved. Within a week of the incident, the hospital in Manaus was receiving letters, gifts, and donations from around the world. Children from elementary schools in Japan sent hand-drawn pictures of the heroic dogs. Veterinary schools in the United States offered free advanced treatment. Dog breeders in Argentina declared the 2 survivors to be living treasures of their breed. The Argentine Dogo Breed Association in Buenos Aires officially inducted Guardian and Fortress into their Hall of Fame, the first rescue dogs ever to receive such recognition. The ceremony, conducted via video link to their hospital room, drew millions of viewers worldwide. The association's president declared that the 2 dogs had proven that courage and loyalty are not learned behaviors, but fundamental characteristics of their breed. More importantly, the story sparked a global conversation about the relationships between elderly humans and their companion animals. Veterinary organizations began studying what they called the guardian effect, the phenomenon of animals performing extraordinary feats when their elderly human companions are in danger. Preliminary research suggested that the bonds formed between seniors and their pets might be even stronger than previously understood. 2 weeks after the Anaconda incident, while still recovering in the hospital, Rosa and Zhao made an announcement that surprised even the medical staff who had grown to know them well. They were officially changing their dogs' names from their original rescue names to Guardian and Fortress, the titles they had earned through their heroic actions. The ceremony was conducted in the hospital's chapel, with representatives from the local Catholic Church, the Brazilian government, and the international media in attendance. Father Miguel Santos, the hospital chaplain, performed a special blessing, declaring that the dogs had shown the face of divine love through their willingness to sacrifice their lives for their family. Guardian and Fortress, still bandaged but mobile,
seemed to understand the significance of the ceremony. They sat perfectly still during the blessing, their intelligent eyes focused on Rosa and Zhao throughout the proceedings. When their new names were officially pronounced, both dogs barked once in unison, a moment that brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. The video of the name change ceremony became one of the most watched animal videos in internet history, eventually surpassing 100 million views across all platforms. Comments poured in from viewers around the world, sharing their own stories of animal loyalty and courage. The incident also had profound implications for animal behavior science. Dr. Alina Rodriguez, a canine behaviorist from the University of Sao Paulo, led a team that studied Guardian and Fortress extensively during their recovery. Her findings challenged several established theories about domestic dog behavior. What these dogs accomplished should have been impossible, according to our current understanding, Dr. Rodriguez explained in her published research. Domestic dogs, no matter how well trained, are not supposed to be able to defeat apex predators in single combat. Yet Guardian and Fortress not only survived such an encounter, they won decisively. The study revealed several factors that contributed to their success. First, their Argentine Dogo genetics provided them with physical capabilities specifically bred for big game hunting. Second, their years of adventure travel with Rosa and Zhao had conditioned them for extreme situations. Most importantly, their emotional bond with their human family had triggered what Dr. Rodriguez termed protective hyper-performance, a state where animals exceed their normal physical and mental limitations to protect their pack. The research was published in the Journal of Animal Behavior and immediately became one of the most cited papers in the field. It opened new avenues of study into the relationships between elderly humans and their companion animals, leading to improved programs for pairing seniors with appropriate protective breeds. 6 months after the Anaconda incident, Rosa and Zhao made another announcement that shocked their doctors, their family, and their global following. They were planning to return to adventure travel, and Guardian and Fortress would be accompanying them. Dr. Santos, their veterinary care coordinator, initially opposed the plan. "These animals nearly died protecting you once," she argued. "Why would you put them in danger again?" But Rosa's response silenced her objections. "Doctor, you don't understand. They didn't nearly die protecting us. They chose to risk death rather than lose their family. To deny them the adventures they love would be the cruelest punishment we could inflict." The medical team eventually agreed to the plan, but with strict conditions. Guardian and Fortress would wear GPS tracking collars at all times. A satellite phone would provide constant communication capability. Most importantly, a veterinary emergency kit would accompany them on every expedition, complete with equipment specifically designed for treating large dog injuries in remote locations. Their first post-recovery adventure was intentionally modest, a week-long camping trip in the Brazilian Cerrado savanna, far from any dangerous wildlife. Local media covered their departure from Manaus like a presidential visit, with hundreds of supporters gathering at the airport to see off the famous quartet. The trip was a complete success. Guardian and Fortress showed no signs of trauma or fear, eagerly exploring their new environment with the same enthusiasm they had always displayed. More importantly, the bond between the 4 adventurers had grown even stronger. They moved as a perfectly coordinated unit, each member constantly aware of the other's positions and needs.
The success of their return to adventure travel sparked what media outlets called the Guardian effect, a worldwide increase in elderly people adopting large protective dog breeds and embarking on outdoor adventures. Senior adventure groups began forming in countries around the world, many specifically requesting Argentine Dogos as their preferred companions. The Argentine Dogo Breed Association reported a 300% increase in adoption applications, with most applicants citing Guardian and Fortress as their inspiration. However, they were careful to screen applicants thoroughly, ensuring that potential owners understood the commitment required to properly care for such powerful animals. Dog training schools developed specialized programs called Guardian protocols,
intensive courses designed to prepare large breed dogs for protective duties with elderly handlers. The curriculum was based on analysis of Guardian and Fortress's behavior patterns, emphasizing the development of tactical thinking and emergency response capabilities. 1 year after the incident, Netflix announced the production of a feature-length documentary titled Guardians of the Amazon: The Guardian and Fortress Story. The film would follow Rosa, Zhao, and their dogs as they returned to the exact location where the Anaconda battle had occurred, accompanied by wildlife experts and animal behaviorists. The return journey was emotional for everyone involved. Carlos, their original guide, who had fled during the attack, broke down in tears when he saw Guardian and Fortress again. He said, "I have lived with shame for a year. I ran when I should have stayed and helped. These dogs showed more courage in one moment than I have shown in my entire life." Guardian and Fortress showed remarkable memory when they reached the battle site. Both dogs immediately adopted alert postures and began systematically investigating the area where the fight had occurred. They found the spot where the Anacondas had died and spent several minutes there, as if paying respects to worthy opponents. The documentary crew captured footage of the dogs discovering the Anaconda nest that had sparked the original conflict. The eggs had long since hatched, but Guardian and Fortress examined the area with intense focus, seemingly understanding the role that location had played in their greatest battle. Most remarkably, when the film crew used CGI to recreate the battle scene, both dogs watched the footage with obvious recognition. Guardian's ears perked up at the sound of his recorded battle growls, while Fortress tilted his head in the way dogs do when they're trying to understand something complex. The documentary's release coincided with Guardian and Fortress receiving the highest honor available to civilian animals, the PDSA Dickin Medal, often called the Victoria Cross for animals. The ceremony took place at the Brazilian Embassy in London, with Rosa and Zhao accepting the medals on behalf of their dogs. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty in the face of extreme danger." On March 15, 2024, Guardian and Fortress demonstrated extraordinary courage in defending their human family against 2 anacondas in the Amazon rainforest. Their actions, at great risk to their own lives, saved 4 human beings and exemplified the highest traditions of animal loyalty and bravery. Guardian and Fortress became only the 75th and 76th recipients of the medal in its 80-year history, and the first dogs to receive it for actions taken in South America. The ceremony was broadcast live to over 50 countries, with an estimated global audience of 200 million viewers. The global attention focused on Guardian and Fortress also brought unexpected benefits to Amazon conservation efforts. The site where their battle occurred became a protected research station, funded by donations from people inspired by their story. The Guardian Research Station now monitors anaconda populations and studies predator-prey relationships in that specific ecosystem. Dr. Carlos Mendoza, the station's lead researcher, reported that the area has become a natural laboratory for understanding anaconda behavior. He explained, "The battle between Guardian, Fortress, and those 2 anacondas gave us unprecedented data about anaconda hunting patterns and territorial behavior. We've learned more about these creatures in the past year than in the previous decade of research." The station also serves as a breeding facility for endangered species native to that region of the Amazon. Ironically, the location where 2 dogs fought for their lives against apex predators has become a sanctuary dedicated to preserving the very ecosystem that nearly claimed their lives. Perhaps the most significant long-term impact of Guardian and Fortress's heroism was the establishment of the Guardian Training Academy in Buenos Aires. Founded by the Argentine Dogo Breed Association and funded by donations from around the world, the academy specializes in training large breed dogs for elderly protection services. The curriculum is entirely based on analysis of Guardian and Fortress's behavior patterns during the Anaconda incident. Students, both human and canine, learn tactical thinking, emergency response, and the development of the intense emotional bonds that enable extraordinary performance under pressure. The Academy's motto, inscribed in Portuguese, Spanish, and English above its main entrance, reads, loyalty beyond limits, courage beyond fear, love beyond life. Graduates of the program are known as Guardian-class dogs and are highly sought after by adventure-seeking seniors around the world. Rosa and Zhao serve as honorary directors of the academy, visiting several times a year to work with new students and their handlers. Guardian and Fortress, now recognized as the founding professors of protective canine behavior, demonstrate techniques that have become standard training protocols.
As we reach the end of this remarkable true story, it's important to understand that the battle between Guardian, Fortress, and two massive anacondas represents something much larger than a simple tale of animal heroism. This is a story about the fundamental bonds that connect all living beings, bonds that become visible only in moments of extreme crisis. Rosa and Joao, both in their 70s, had found in Guardian and Fortress not just companions for their adventures, but family members who would literally face death rather than lose them. The dogs, rescued from abandonment and abuse, had discovered in their elderly humans the kind of unconditional love that transforms broken spirits into unbreakable warriors. The scientific community continues to study what they call the Guardian phenomenon, the ability of deeply bonded animals to exceed their normal physical and mental limitations when protecting their human family. But perhaps science is asking the wrong questions. Perhaps the real mystery isn't how Guardian and Fortress defeated two anacondas, but why we're surprised that love could prove stronger than fear, that loyalty could overcome impossible odds. In our modern world, where genuine connections seem increasingly rare, the story of four family members who chose to face death together rather than abandon each other offers a powerful reminder of what really matters. Guardian and Fortress didn't become heroes because they were exceptional dogs. They became heroes because they were loved unconditionally and returned that love without reservation. Every day, around the world, elderly people sit in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, their children grown and scattered, their spouses often gone, feeling forgotten by a world that values youth and productivity above wisdom and experience. Many of these seniors have companion animals, dogs, cats, birds, who provide not just comfort, but purpose and unconditional love. The story of Guardian and Fortress reminds us that these relationships are not sentimental luxuries, but fundamental human needs that transcend age, species, and circumstance. The bond between Rosa, Joao, and their dogs represents the kind of family connection that our souls crave: loyalty without conditions, love without limits, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for those we hold dear. Research has shown that elderly people with companion animals live longer, healthier, and happier lives. But the Guardian and Fortress story suggests something even more profound: that these relationships can transform ordinary creatures into extraordinary beings, capable of feats that defy explanation and inspire hope. Today, 3 years after their battle in the Amazon, Guardian and Fortress continue their adventures with Rosa and Joao. They have climbed mountains in Patagonia, explored glaciers in Antarctica, and trekked through deserts in Chile. Age has begun to slow all four adventurers, but their spirit remains undiminished. Guardian, now 8 years old, moves with the dignified pace of a veteran warrior. The scar across his face has become his most distinctive feature, and children who meet him often ask to touch the mark left by his battle with the anaconda. He tolerates such attention with patient grace, seeming to understand his role as a living symbol of courage. Fortress, slightly younger at 7, has retained more of his playful energy. His shoulder, rebuilt by skilled surgeons, functions perfectly, though he favors it slightly on cold mornings. He has become the guardian of Guardian, watching over his older packmate with the same devotion he once showed Rosa and Joao. Rosa, now 76, moves more carefully than she did 3 years ago, but her eyes still sparkle with the anticipation of the next adventure. She has written a book about their experiences, with all proceeds donated to animal rescue organizations around the world. Her message is simple but powerful. Love is the only currency that appreciates when you spend it. Joao, approaching 78,
has used his engineering skills to design safety equipment specifically for elderly adventurers and their animal companions. His innovations have saved dozens of lives and improved the safety of senior adventure travel worldwide. He claims his greatest engineering achievement isn't any building or bridge he designed, but the family he built with Rosa, Guardian, and Fortress. As we close this extraordinary true story, I want you to think about the elderly people in your own life. Your grandparents, your parents, that neighbor who lives alone with only their dog for company. The Guardian and Fortress story reminds us that age doesn't diminish the capacity for adventure, courage, or love. It often enhances these qualities by stripping away everything that isn't essential. If you're watching this video and you're over 60, please know that your story isn't over. It might just be beginning. If you have children or grandchildren watching, understand that the older generation in your family has reserves of strength and courage that might surprise you. And if you're considering adopting a companion animal, remember that you're not just gaining a pet, you're potentially gaining a family member who had faced down anacondas to protect you. The bond between humans and their animal companions represents one of the purest forms of love available on this planet. It's a love without conditions, without expectations, without the complications that often plague human relationships. Guardian and Fortress didn't save Rosa and Joao because they expected reward or recognition. They acted from pure loyalty and unconditional love. This is Wild Echo Untold, and we're dedicated to sharing the most remarkable adventures of our golden generation. In the comments below, I want you to share the name of your country and tell us about an animal in your life that has shown extraordinary loyalty or courage. If you don't have such an animal yet, tell us about the elderly person in your life who inspires you most. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're building a community of people who understand that age is just a number, and that the most incredible stories often come from those who have lived long enough to accumulate real wisdom. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that heroes come in all ages and all species. Guardian and Fortress proved that love conquers fear, that loyalty trumps size, and the bonds we forge with those we love can give us strength beyond our natural limitations. Their story reminds us that in a world full of temporary connections and conditional relationships, the love between a human and their animal companion remains one of the purest and permanent bonds we can count on. Thank you for joining us for this incredible true story. Remember, you're never too old for adventure, never too experienced for wonder, and never too wise to learn something new about the power of unconditional love. Until next time, this is Wild Echo Untold, celebrating the extraordinary adventures of extraordinary lives.